Very rarely you find yourself transformed by a moment. Tonight I am transformed. If I and thousands of others hadn't voted for that motherfucker, this show would be over in 15 minutes. I could be home watching The Walking Dead right now. So my publicist says, whatever you do, don't talk politics. I was like, oh, okay. And I show up, and 15 minutes later, I'm Darth Vader. I didn't even vote. "31 years ago, I was walking down a desolate road right outside of Tlayacapan, Mexico. We all know where that is. And I had just gotten into a set of blows with this lunatic director I was working with. Really, basically, a first-time director named Oliver Stone on this little independent film called Salvador. And now we had not come to blows, thank you. We had not come to blows over, the size of my trailer because I didn't have one. And we didn't come to blows over the fact that he wasn't shooting my good side because I wrote this speech. I didn't have one. Thanks for the joke. No, we were actually fighting, ladies and gentlemen of the Writers Guild, about writing. We were fighting about what the character should say and do. And I, of course, knew better. So I was having a hissy fit, and I decided, that's it. I'm going to walk to Mexico City or hitchhike, which was 300 miles away. So Oliver set up a production, got the production people to set up a big roadblock. And being the writer, of course, got a couple of extras and put them in federales uniforms and told them to tell anybody who came by that there was a crazy, this was 1985, so I can do this, gringo with a gun up ahead, and that if you stopped, he'd carjack your car. And of course, I was wearing this ridiculous rubber prop gun and so on. So after about 5 hours of me sitting there and watching every farmer in the entire county go by me at 100 miles an hour, I decided to walk back and apologize and I'm sorry. And the next thing you know, Oliver said, I was thinking about what you said and it's actually a good idea. And here's one of the most nominated writers in history who actually has a very judicious lack of pride of authorship. I was very moved by that. So I got to be right that time. And then for the next 3 decades, he got to be right. For the next 3 decades, this man ripped like a chainsaw through every cinema convention that you could possibly imagine. He redefined cinema as a writer and as a director. Somewhere in the teleprompter, I didn't even look at the teleprompter. I wrote this, I didn't even look at it. Come on, zip it up there. There you go, here we go. Ah, good. Keep going. Oh yeah, this part. He was not about his detractors. See, I didn't want to talk about detractors. I didn't want to talk about something negative. He was not without his detractors, and it's understandable because he had a very personal sense of history. And yet, who but Oliver Stone could define the zeitgeist of a culture in 3 simple words? Greed is good. Who but Oliver Stone would enlist in the Vietnam War and ask to be in combat, while others, of conscience, were taking midnight trips to Canada? Who besides Oliver Stone would win a Bronze Star of Valor, be wounded twice, and take that experience as a writer and make one of the great war films of all times, Platoon? And then follow it up with one of the great anti-war films of all time, Born on the 4th of July. And follow that up with the story of its victims, Heaven and Earth. That's a writer. Snapshot. We're at our friend's house. I'll go with Oliver to Tita Khan's house. And at the end of the night, I'm sitting with Oliver and this other writer, director, Billy Wilder. I love saying that. Yeah, sitting with Oliver and Billy Wilder, and we're talking. And Billy says, so Oliver, what are you doing these days? And he was like 90 years old at the time and sharp as a tack. And Oliver said, well, I'm making a film. I'm working on it now. Actually, Jimmy's in it. And he said, oh, what film are you making? He said, well, we're doing Nixon, Tony. I said, hold on. What did you say there? You're doing what? He said, we're doing Nixon. I said, Nixon? What do you mean you're doing Nixon? Nixon what? He said, well, we're making, Tony Hopkins is playing Richard. He said, hold on. You're making a movie about Richard Nixon? He said, yeah. He said, well, who the fuck wants to see a movie about Richard Nixon? And I waited for Oliver's response, and he sat there like your pet German shepherd does when you give him too much like peanut butter and a tongue is stuck to the roof of his mouth. And I wondered about it too. I said, yeah, who does want to make a movie or see a movie about Richard Nixon when you think about it? But who wants to see a movie about Richard Boyle or about Edward Snowden or about Jim Morrison or George W. Bush? But if those movies aren't made, somehow what we all do here is less. Why does Oliver imbue those people with a fundamental sense of goodness that others might never choose to see? So in the words of the master, you have to make films as an idealist. You've got to make them to the greater glory of mankind, because then even if you fail, even if the film doesn't work, you don't have to be ashamed because you tried. But if you try something that is small and negative and you fail, what do you have? I'd venture to say, not much. In fact, I think the world of cinema would be a much smaller world indeed.
God, thank you for this award. I've always considered screenwriting to be the secret to the movies I like. Some scripts have few words, some a lot, some stream of consciousness, like Terry Malick's work. But there's always a sort of magic sunlight to the ones that shine through. I've been chasing that light all my life, and in that spirit, I'd like to thank and remember the late Robert Bolt, who took me into a room for 3 weeks, red-penciled my entire script without realizing it, and shared with me his worldview of character and event. I also thank Ernie Lehman, who wrote some of my favorite films and gave me great encouragement at a needed time. And his agent, also my first agent at the William Morris Agency, Ron Mardigian. Those of you who remember him remember a real gentleman to the bone and a great partner in using skillful means in a volatile profession. I left him eventually to become a director, and please forgive me, Ron, but I think you understand why. I don't know if I should go into Billy Wilder because Jimmy told it, but of course there was Billy Wilder. He always told me to make short films. So when I told him that Nixon was 3 hours and 10 minutes, he looked at me, you know what that was like, and he said, "You're never going to make a dime." And he was right. But sometimes there's other reasons you want to make the picture. As I was saying, I also want to thank my collaborators over the years. There were many. Some of these relationships worked better than others, but each of these writers worked as hard as any coal miner, deep down in the earth, chasing the light. Even if at the end of the day, some of those works were not to be recognized in their time. I believe the strengths I had as a director grew ultimately from the writing, from being alone with myself in finding the solitude that cuts through the materialism around us. It's an honor to have been a screenwriter and to have had some time in the sun. I should get off now, but it'd be remiss of me in reaching the end of this sojourn in Hollywood not to remind you, especially you younger writers, that you can be critical of your government and your society. You don't have to fit in. It's fashionable now to take shots at Republicans and Trump and all that, and avoid the Obamas and Clintons. But remember this. In the 13 wars we've started over the last 30 years, and the $14 trillion we've spent, and the hundreds of thousands of lives that have perished from this earth, remember that it wasn't one leader, but a system, both Republican and Democrat. And call it what you will, the military, industrial, security, money, media, complex, It's a system that has been perpetuated, that has been perpetuated under the guise that these are just wars, justifiable in the name of our flag that flies so proudly over our lives. Our country has become more prosperous for many, but in the name of that wealth, we cannot justify our system as a center for the world's values when we continue to create such war and chaos in the world. Thank you. No need to go through the victims, but we know we've intervened in more than 100 countries with invasions, regime change, economic chaos, or hybrid war, soft power, whatever you want to call it. It's war of some kind. In the end, it has become a system leading to the death of this planet and the extinction of us all. I fought these people who practice war most of my life. It's a tiring game, and mostly you'll get your ass kicked. And with all the criticism and the insults that you'll receive, and the flattery too, it's important to remember, if you believe in what you're saying and you can stay the course, you can make a difference. I urge you to find a way to remain alone with yourself. Listen to your silences, not always in a writer's room. Try to find not what the crowd wants so that you can be successful, but try instead to find the true inner meaning of your life here on earth. And never give up on your heart in your struggle for peace, decency, and telling the truth.